This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning, everyone. We're coming on the air right now with breaking news coming out of the Middle East right now.
An Egypt airplane has been hijacked while flying from the coastal city of Alexandria to the capital of Cairo. It was diverted to the island of Cyprus.
And what we're learning right now is there is a person on board that claims to be wearing an explosive belt. You see the island of Cyprus right there. ABC's Lama Hassan is tracking all of the developments from London with the breaking details. Lama, what are you hearing from your post right now?
Yeah, good morning to you, Candace. Well, this is developing right now. Information is still coming in, but here's what we know at this hour. According to Cypriot officials, the hijacker is reportedly demanding access to a translator and has asked for political asylum. EgyptAir is confirming that the man is an Egyptian national by the name of Ibrahim Samaha. There are conflicting reports, however, of how many people are on board and the nationalities that are on board. We understand that about 56 people are on that flight, in addition to 7 crew members. Among them, again, these are reports that we have not been able to confirm at this hour, but we understand that there are at least 4 foreigners on board. The majority of passengers, we understand, have been released. But of course, here's what happened earlier. EgyptAir Flight 181, a domestic flight that was traveling from Alexandria to Cairo in Egypt, was hijacked. It was forced to land at Larnaca Airport in Cyprus. Airline and Egyptian government officials have reportedly said that the plane was hijacked by a man wearing a suicide vest. As you rightly said, EgyptAir has set up a crisis center, we understand, to deal with the hijacking.
And Lama, we're taking a look right now at images of people deplaning from that hijacked plane that we believe. We know that you, Lama, have traveled extensively in and out of Egypt. Are you surprised that someone with a reported explosive vest was able to make it onto a plane?
Well, let's remember that this was a flight, a domestic flight that was traveling from Alexandria to Cairo. So the security is very different to if you were traveling, for example, internationally. Security domestically is very lax. And this latest incident raises some serious questions about security at Egyptian airports. I mean, even if you are traveling internationally, it is still pretty lax when you compare it to Western standards, for example, because, you know, this comes just 5 months after that Russian aircraft that was traveling over Sharm el-Sheikh that was blown up. All 224 people, as you recall, were killed. So again, this latest incident just raises even more questions about security at Egyptian airports, whether it's domestic or the international airport in Cairo.
And this is also, I should point out, coming exactly 1 week after the attack in Brussels, which ISIS was responsible for, believed responsible for. Do we get a sense of who might be responsible for this particular hijacking at this point? I know it's fairly early, but what are you hearing, Mama?
It is fairly early, you're right, and information is still coming into us. But here is what we know right now. We know that this man, who has been named by Egyptian officials as Ibrahim Samaha, also an Egyptian national, we understand that he is asking for political asylum. So we have to be very careful at this point with reports of whether or not this man was influenced by IS or ISIS. So at this hour, we understand that he is seeking political asylum. And of course, we heard that he's also asked for a translator. As I said, the Egyptian officials, the Egyptian Air has set up a crisis center to deal with this. So at this hour, we understand that he is asking for political asylum.
All right. Now, very latest there from Lama Hassan, who's reporting for us from our bureau there in London. Lama, continue to keep us abreast of what is going on.
And after recent terror attacks, many will wonder how a passenger got on a plane and possibly with a bomb.
And of course, you know, moments ago we spoke with ABC News contributor Stephen Gagnon.
Well, you remember the recent downing of the Russian airliner in the Sinai points to how weak security actually is in Egypt. And so this certainly isn't surprising that a domestic flight where the security was probably quite poor allowed somebody to get on board with either a weapon or a bomb.
And Steve, Colonel, tell us about the security issues for flights in this particular part of the world. Of course, you were mentioning the EgyptAir or the flight from Sharm el-Sheikh a little earlier, but security at this particular airport and this part of the world.
Egypt has had a problem with aviation security for a long time. We've seen it tragically pointed out recently. I think one of the things that's interesting here to me is that, remember, in the 70s and the 80s, there were lots of hijackings that were done by left-wing Palestinian terrorists, the PLO, the PFLP-GC, those kinds of folks. This is a very different time. These are usually motivated by religious grievances, radical Islamists, rather than what we knew in the 70s and 80s as hijackings that were much more left-wing ideological. And this is also the time of suicide vests and suicide bombings, which we didn't always see in the hijackings in the Middle East in the 70s and the 80s.
We know that Egypt shares a border with Israel. We know that Egyptian President al-Sisi has a pretty good relationship with Israel, considering. What do you think happens in a situation like this, and how does Israel respond?
No doubt, given the close cooperation between Egypt and Israel on security matters, that the Israelis were alerted early on. And they probably have folks en route to Cyprus right now. So I think that the Israeli capabilities in terms of counter hijacking and in these sort of in extremis hostage situations will be called into play.
And Colonel, I'm not sure how familiar in the early morning hours you are with why this plane might have landed in Cyprus. Any idea why they might have gone there to that particular airport?
That's a bit baffling. Remember, again, going back to the kinds of hijackings where we saw were in the 70s and 80s in the Middle East, they would fly to a third country and then ask for ransom and negotiate and either let the hostages go or blow the airplane up without the hostage in it. Here, Cyprus is not unusual, but this was a short flight, inter-Egypt from Alexandria to Cairo, and so it's not very far away to get across the Mediterranean. They're just off the Israeli coast, so why they took it to Cyprus remains a mystery, and maybe it's more politically rather than religiously motivated, but we'll have to wait and see.
So just to recap our breaking news story, a domestic EgyptAir flight traveling from Alexandria to Cairo has been hijacked, reportedly by someone with an explosive belt on board. It was forced to land in Cyprus. We believe some of those passengers were allowed to deplane. There are still believed to be some foreigners on board.
This is EgyptAir flight 181. It is there in Cyprus. You see some of those passengers that were allowed to leave the airplane moments ago, but we're told that several passengers are on board still, and the entire crew is on board that plane. We're continuing to follow the very latest developments in this breaking news. But for now, we're going to return you to your regular programming.
For some of you, that's World News Now and America This Morning. Stay with ABC News for the latest. I'm Rena Ninan with Candace Gibson in New York. Have a good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.